I just know for a fact that I would tear up every time I walked past my local butchers and smelled their pork baps. That's just a simple pleasure in my life that I'm not willing to give up. Soya, too, it's now one of the leading causes of deforestation in South America.
Lifting vegan logical.
Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be responding to the Oxford Union debate, trying to figure out whether or not the House should go vegan. Spoiler alert, the vegan side ended up winning the debate, but I still think it would be worth it to spend some time responding to the arguments made on the anti-vegan side. The anti-vegan side consisted of a decent proportion of non-arguments, often in the form of humor, and thankfully, some kind of arguments I could actually respond to in this video. Even though the anti-vegan arguments were horrible, including things like comparing the protein content of almond milk and cow's milk, rather than compare cow's milk to a more protein-dense milk like soy milk.
Now, shall we go to protein, which is very important for energy and muscles, as the athletes in the room will know. Let's go for the almond drink. 0.5 grams in this. What would we say for the cow's milk? Higher or lower? Higher, 3.6, 7 times as much.
They still looked pretty good relative to their side's non-argumentative attempts at humor. Now, before we get into the actual arguments, I do think there is something to be said about how much the anti-vegan side throughout the entire Oxford Union debate resorted to humor rather than providing actual substantive arguments in opposition to veganism. It could have something to do with the arguments against veganism being so shit that the side feels the need to largely resort to humor. Who really knows? We won't be spending too much time responding directly to the attempts at humor in this video because, as we all know, Brandolini's law is hard enough on vegans when it comes to trying to respond to anti-vegan arguments. Let's start with Manon Hammond.
I'd like to start my speech by thanking Disha, our president, for giving me the privilege of speaking in our final debate of term. I would also like to start my speech by taking her at her best, her roast of me, reminding you that yes, we are outnumbered in Wales 3-1 by sheep. So I urge you, when voting, to just think of us poor Welsh people. What are we going to do if we can't show the sheep who's boss anymore by eating them? We are in grave danger of being taken over by these animals.
Now, while I get the attempt at humor here, the whole "we are in grave danger of being taken over by these animals" joke is more representative of the serious position of, quote, what will we do with all these animals if we don't decide to eat them? So in case anybody watching is thinking about this, I might as well respond by saying, what exactly happened to all of the horses that we used to use for transportation but now have been, replaced by cars? Well, we stopped breeding them over time. Crazy concept. It turns out that when you stop breeding animals into existence, they won't exist to the same capacity.
I have a stressful daily life fueled by an Oxford degree and the terrifying prospect of having to do something with my life once I leave this place. So forgive me if I don't tend to spend too much time planning out and preparing my meals.
Yeah, so let's compare the stressful life of this Oxford student to the stressful life that she funds when she decides to casually consume animal products. I wonder which life is more stressful. Secondly, this idea that going vegan necessarily entails having to extensively and insanely plan out your meals is just nonsense. In the beginning, you will learn some new things, but if I'm being honest, at this point, after 8.5 years of being vegan, I do not plan my meals to any greater degree than I did when I wasn't vegan. And that's coming from somebody who is super into fitness and tries to count their macronutrients every single day. And also somebody who doesn't live in the UK. She lives in the UK, where there are so many vegan options compared to other places. But hey, let's not forget that because she has a very difficult life trying to obtain an Oxford degree, she gets to fund this. Something far less difficult. Boo-hoo, I feel so sorry for her.
So I'm going to talk about why I, and you, given the personal choice, just wouldn't become a vegan. And the fact that most people tend to agree means that attempting to solve the problems spoken about on proposition with veganism is a doomed endeavor anyway.
Yeah, so because it's very difficult to get everybody to stop funding animal rights violations, trying to do so is a doomed endeavor. Even, I guess, on an individual level, in her view. I guess if we lived in a world where most people were racist and it was very hard to move them off that position, then trying to make people not racist would be a doomed endeavor. Makes sense. We should try to view every single kind of justice movement under this lens and not do anything about anything because most people are difficult to move off of their current position.
And later on in my speech, I'll explain why, on balance, I think ethically it is still remains the right choice not to go vegan. First, let me explain why I think this personal take holds any value in a debate that is largely about fundamental ethics. While I think it's meaningful to debate the ethics of consumption, I also think it's nearly impossible to do so effectively. Not only because right and wrong are different to different people and always will be.
Okay, hold on. We'll let her finish her sentence in a bit, but is she serious right now? She thinks it is nearly impossible to debate the ethics of consumption, partially because morality is subjective. If there was a market for human meat made from children, would she be saying anything even remotely close to this? Imagine somebody is funding a factory farm which farms human children, and they say,
While I think it's meaningful to debate the ethics of consumption, I also think it's nearly impossible to do so effectively. Not only because right and wrong are different to different people and always will be,
sounds like a beautiful justification, but let's continue to hear her out.
but also because when it comes to consumption and human behavior, it is near impossible to reach a point of total morality.
So we have morality is subjective though, and an appeal to futility fallacy as her opener in this Oxford Union debate. Very scholarly. Because it is very difficult to reach a point of total morality with consumption, I'm not going to advocate for us to stop factory farming human children. Oh, also people who financially support the factory farming of human children just have different morals than me, so we shouldn't do anything about it. Morality is just subjective.
If we eat animals, we have to kill them. But if we don't, they die because we ruin their habitats for crops.
So both of those things happen under animal agriculture, and even to a higher degree when compared to plant agriculture, because animal agriculture requires more land and crops per calorie obtained. If you want to reduce the degree to which land is cleared for agriculture, going vegan is still the better option. And a vegan world seems to be one of the only worlds that would care enough to make plant farming entail less animal death. So either way, even on the topic of crop deaths, going vegan and helping create a vegan world is a good idea. It's hard to imagine how a world who currently breeds animals into existence to murder them would care about the animals dying in crop fields.
Or they can't survive in the wild, or the fact that we can't shear, milk, or eat them anymore renders them fairly useless in today's society in the condition that they're at, after thousands of years of natural selection, so they're phased out entirely anyway.
Oh no, if we have a vegan world, she won't be able to exploit and murder animals. So sad for her. Here's something we can do. Take care of them and let them live out their lives as we do with other animals that we decide to not consume. And obviously a vegan world would be more than happy to participate in something like this. Also, giving animals a life does not justify exploiting and murdering them for our benefit. Would we be justified in breeding, exploiting, and murdering a particular type of human for food because in doing so we give them life temporarily before taking it away from them? Of course not.
Listen, I won't stand here and argue that conditioning people into thinking that KFC is a good protein source is healthy, but neither is pumping out artificial produce onto shelves as protein replacements and convincing people that taking 5 vitamin supplements a day will restore the balance that's been thrown off by adopting a diet very few human bodies have lived on since the conception of the race.
Yeah, so she just implies that vegan mock products are unhealthy, and as per usual with people who do this, she did this without any evidence or even specification, which is extremely dumb given how much plant-based mock products vary in composition. I cover this and whether plant-based meat is healthier than animal flesh in this video. Spoiler alert, it certainly can be. She also implies that vegans taking 5 vitamin supplements a day is not healthy. I don't know one vegan who takes 5 vitamin supplements per day, but even if there was someone who did this, what's the argument that this would be unhealthy? Secondly, what does she have to say about all the positive health outcomes we see from long-term vegans? But never mind, screw health outcome data. I'm just gonna say supplements though, even though vegans who take supplements seem to be healthy. Hopefully it sticks. Lastly, she claimed that very few human bodies have sustained themselves on a vegan diet since our conception. The word few is typically meant to represent a small number. Well, this study that I just cited contained 5,548 vegans. What is she talking about?
So let's talk a bit about why I just wouldn't become a vegan within the context of my own life. Number 1, I would be kicked out of my house. For some illustration, I was sat at a table of farmers at my godfather's wedding a couple of years ago, and me being the resident city slicker from Cardiff, I know, I was asked, "Oh God, you're not one of those vegetarians, are you?" My aunt, uncle, and cousins are veggie, but my grandma insists that my cousin's boyfriend cooks a turkey every year so she doesn't have to endure a Christmas nut roast. I think it's quite clear that if I came home this vacation and announced that I would no longer not just be eating meat, but no cow's milk, no honey, no eggs, no cheese, and so on, not only would I have to endure a lot of teasing and a traitor stamp on my forehead, but I'd also have to shop and cook for myself and opt out of a system where I don't spend the dregs of my student loan on quinoa. It just doesn't make sense for me.
So obviously she wouldn't be kicked out of her house. We can just ignore that. But oh my God, she would have to cook for herself? What a tragedy. That's almost as bad as being murdered in a gas chamber like a pig in animal agriculture. She would also be teased by her family. This is definitely worse than being thrown in a gas chamber. And lastly, quinoa is expensive though. Quinoa is not the only food there is when you go vegan. What a crazy thing here. We're all very shocked. And secondly, vegan diets can be cheaper than non-vegan diets. Non-vegan diets can be cheaper than vegan diets. Another shocking fact, vegan foods, like non-vegan foods, can be either expensive or inexpensive. And according to this analysis from The Lancet titled The Global and Regional Costs of Healthy and Sustainable Dietary Patterns, a Modeling Study, quote, across the dietary patterns, the relative affordability was largest for vegetarian and vegan diets that focus on legumes and whole grains in place of animal products in current diets, and lowest for pescatarian diets that focus on fish and fruits and vegetables. But quinoa though.
Secondly, it would make me miserable. No matter how many times people tell me that tofu can be really nice if you just put enough seasoning on it that it no longer really tastes like tofu, I just know for a fact that I would tear up every time I walk past my local butchers and smelled their pork babs. That's just a simple pleasure in my life that I'm not willing to give up.
Yeah, so the usual indirect admission of not knowing how to cook. This is something you can almost always take away from anti-vegans who say that tofu tastes bad or tastes like nothing. And again, oh no, I feel so bad for her. If she stopped paying for pigs to be mass murdered, she would be so sad when she walks by their dismembered corpses because she wouldn't be able to eat them. She is the true victim here, not the pigs that are mass bred to be exploited and killed for her pleasure.
The same goes for my chips and gravy after Bridge Thursday.
I just feel so bad for her. Her chips and gravy. I've just come to the conclusion that veganism is not worth committing to because of her chips and gravy. What are we gonna do? I really just can't get over how much of the victim she is in this situation. And not just her, but her friends.
Socially, too. If I'm going out with my friends, I don't want to have to alter our plans based on my veganism, and they certainly don't want to. That's not a burden that I am willing to bear.
She has friends that want to eat food that requires breeding and murdering animals, and if she decides to not want to contribute to breeding and murdering animals, her friends may have to alter their plans such that they don't have to entail breeding and murdering animals. Poor them.
You may think that these are sort of funny and insignificant little arguments, but they speak to a wider truth that switching to veganism just isn't realistic or desirable for most people.
I guess us vegans are just a bunch of cartoons. Not sure what she means by realistic here. And yeah, look how undesirable all this vegan food is.
Even if we take prop at their best and can see that this motion talks about a process and a journey.
She said journey. This might be her most powerful argument thus far.
And finally, on nutrition. The 3-bean ragouts, mushroom beef Wellingtons, and buckwheat pancakes I see on my For You page look really good. But if you think that I'm cooking those in my 7-person windowless basement student kitchen, you are sorely mistaken.
Yeah, you don't need to eat those things to be vegan. Insane stuff here.
The reality is that adopting a diet with far fewer restrictions allows someone like me to get a variety of sources of nutrition and protein almost without thinking.
Oh yeah, guys. The reality is that adopting a diet of everything, including human children, dogs, and cats, allows me to get a variety of nutrition and protein almost without thinking. And jokes aside, I've been vegan for 8.5 years. I get 150 plus grams of protein per day, basically without thinking.
And that is my priority, and I shouldn't be made to feel insufficient for not being able to go vegan.
Very bizarre framing here. Nobody is trying to make her feel insufficient for not being able to stop funding animal abuse. People are getting on you for not being willing to stop funding animal abuse, especially in one of the most vegan-friendly countries on the planet. Weird how she snuck in the words not able to as opposed to not willing to, as if there was some physical impossibility entailed by her being vegan.
The animals that we consume are not built for nature, and I'm not sure what Proposition thinks will happen to them if we neglect them. I mean, I suppose either we domesticate them, I'm not sure if you want a cow actually in your house, but I also just think this is just as morally objectionable as milking them.
Now, just a reminder of what the dairy industry entails. It isn't just milking them. And of course, the vegan world would be filled with tons of animal sanctuaries where these animals would be able to live out the rest of their lives. If you want to call that domestication, sure. But how exactly is that just as morally objectionable as this?
Or we leave them to die. No, thank you.
By, quote, leave them to die, do you mean let them live out their lives as we do with dogs and cats currently? Because this is what would happen. Obviously, vegans wouldn't just be like, oh shit, cows, peace out, have fun starving to death. This framing is just so honest.
Soya, too. It's now one of the leading causes of deforestation in South America.
Oh no, it must be the vegans that are primarily driving deforestation from soy production. Wrong, it's actually non-vegans because of the amount of soy grown to feed animals.
Veganism is far too reliant on certain very few crops. So we're inevitably creating an unsustainable and actively harmful production cycle.
Yeah, so she says this, even though the largest meta-analysis of food systems to date claims that a vegan diet could reduce food's land use by 3.1 billion hectares, which would be a 76% reduction, including a 19% reduction in arable land use. It would help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 6.6 billion metric tons. This would be a 49% reduction. Acidification and eutrophication can go down by 50% and 49% respectively. And lastly, scarcity-weighted freshwater withdrawals can go down by 19%. This all sounds terrible for the planet. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you'd like me to respond to other parts of the Oxford Union's anti-vegan side, and I'll consider it. Thank you so much for watching. If you support my work and want to get early access to it, you can click the link in the pinned comment and support me on Patreon, where you can also get one-on-one messaging access with me. And if you don't know, I do have a book going over most, if not all, of the anti-vegan arguments you're going to hear online. If you want to get that as well, that'll be linked in the pinned comment. And there are links below for vegan protein powder and vegan merch, both of which, if you purchase, will help the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude,
Fuck off, I don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to me again. You're a fucking piece of shit.
even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude,